What role does intuition play as a parent of a PDA child or teen? Hi, I'm Casey, founder of At Peace Parents, and I've helped hundreds of parents stabilize their home and find peace while parenting a PDA child or teen. So today I want to talk about a topic that is a little bit more woo-woo than I normally talk about, because I am often talking about data and logical frameworks and things like that, but today I really want to talk about intuition. So I'm going to start with a story. I'm going to tell you how I understand and define intuition. I'm going to give you a couple examples of how my intuition worked when my son was younger and before I knew about PDA or even what neurodiversity and neurodivergence were. Then I'm going to talk about the pattern that I've seen of intuition among the parents that I work with in the program that I run. And then I'm going to plant some final seeds for you about how I think about and what I believe to be true about intuition, and of course follow your intuition as to whether it resonates for you. So I'm going to start with a story from when my PDA son Cooper, who is now 9.5, was around the age of 3.5, okay? So at that time, we only had one child, and we lived right outside of Washington, D.C., inside the Beltway, but in Maryland, in a place called Hyattsville. And we had a teeny little house, and I would take the metro every day, a 45-minute commute to downtown D.C. to do my job at the research nonprofit where I worked. And I would often feel a sense of dread on the way home when it was my night to care for Cooper. And my husband and I, because of the level of intensity that we experienced just being with Cooper and his constant need for one-on-one attention and signals of nervous system safety, we would switch off and on. So one night I would be completely in charge of putting him down, and my husband would actually stay out of the house, and then we'd switch. So there was a period of time around the age of 3 when I would come home. I would pick him up from his daycare. I would take him home. The daycare people would say, he had a great day, he had so much fun, all the things, he's a leader, he's excited, he has all these friends. We would walk in the door, and he would immediately start to be agitated, aroused, seemingly like disconnected, and any interaction that I would have with him of like, oh, why don't we play this game, or why don't we eat a snack, it would tip him off, and he would start to what I now understand as a panic attack, but it was just screaming and like manic motion and destruction, and sometimes trying to run out the front door. So I would never know what to do in these situations or understand what was happening. Like, why was this happening, especially when he seemed to have a great day at daycare and seemed totally typical and fine. So, I started needing to carry him up the stairs and bring him into his room, and I would put him in his crib because I needed to contain him in some way so he didn't get hurt or run out the front door or smash things or smash me. So day after day after day on my nights, and my husband too, but this is my experience, he would spend an hour and a half just screaming. And when I would try and soothe him, I would say, it's okay, or like, let's have a snack, or, what's wrong? I would be trying to figure it out. I would be naturally trying to stop whatever pain was causing this that I couldn't see. It would escalate him even more. And so I learned to, not try and I had a phone call, but I'm back. So I would learn to, if I tried to soothe him, it would activate him even more. So I would lay in the dark bedroom. I would turn off the lights, not completely, like you could still have some light coming in the window upstairs. I would lay on the ground, and just like tears would stream down my face because it seemed like I had no capacity to support him, right? So I would just lay on the ground, crying and crying until eventually he would peter himself out and I wouldn't understand what had happened. And this went on for months. And then one day I had this like ping of an idea that was like, tell him everyone that's ever loved him. So I got up and I like was next to the crib and I started just saying, Mommy loves you, Daddy loves you, Granny loves you, Nana loves you, your preschool teachers loved you. And I just kept naming the people that loved him. And, it didn't stop the screaming or the manic behavior right away, but it diminished it in a way that made me think, oh, this actually had an impact. It actually wasn't making it worse at the very least, and there was something that I could do. And these months came and went without any explanation, right? Like, it went on for a period of months, and then it sort of stopped, right? And then he, like, a year later went into burnout, but it was very confusing to me. But I'm pointing out that moment of intuition because what did I intuit? I intuited that anything that without being able to name it or have the logic, which I now do, and that's why I'm sharing it with you, because now, 6.5 years later, I understand in retrospect and put language to the logic of what happened so I can share with you, but I did not have it at the time. And so it was intuition where it was like, okay, any attempt at me soothing is going to activate his perception of threat and nervous system because he's going to perceive I'm trying to make something happen, right? There's an agenda or an expectation. And when I said, this person loves you, this person loves you, I was intuitively using declarative language and providing signals of nervous system safety in the way that like my body intuition told me to do it. And I'm not naming this because I think there's something special about me. I actually think that this is true for all of you. All of you who are here watching, all of you who are here on this page, all of you who are listening to this podcast, I believe that all of you have had a series of these moments when your intuition kicked in. And unfortunately, especially for us as parents, as PDAers, we are experiencing so much feedback that is counter to our intuition. We cease to believe it. We cease to listen to it. Okay? So I want to tell you how I think about intuition because it is a little bit of a like squishy concept and something that like my advisors in my doctoral degree would be like, yeah, you can't talk about that as like a variable because you can't measure it, right? You can't see it with your own two eyes. But I am no longer in academia. I'm here with you, so we can conceptualize it however we want. So when I first started thinking about intuition, I didn't think of myself as very intuitive because I was like, well, I didn't realize he was neurodivergent. I didn't realize he was autistic fully. I didn't know anything about neurodiversity, and I didn't have this aha moment of clarity where it's like, oh, he's PDA, right? So the intuition I like to think of as bodily sensations, emotions, or thoughts that come from seemingly a place of nowhere, not necessarily a place where you can put logic or language to it. It's just this sensation in the body, a gut instinct, a thought, a knowing. That's a breadcrumb on your path that you can follow or not. And often that breadcrumb doesn't make sense within the context of our experience in the society we live in, right? Where it's like, well, there's all these strategies that you can apply to stop a screaming child, and I tried all of them and none of them worked, right? So it's like moving away from thinking to yourself, I'm doing it wrong, into like, what is my body or this emotion or thought telling me that maybe I can follow as the next breadcrumb on the path to more peace or clarity. Okay, so I'm going to give you two other examples from my life, and then I'm going to go into some of the patterns I've seen from working with all the parents I've worked with. So I remember this small breadcrumb of clarity that I had post my son's burnout, or like in the recovery period when we moved from Washington, D.C. to Michigan, and we had a trampoline and we still have a trampoline in our backyard and swings. And we were also doing OT. And I remember how many hours I had to spend bouncing my son's body on the trampoline or swinging his body for him, right? It was almost as if he wasn't spinning, swinging, roughhousing, crashing, or jumping, or having someone do that for him, he was perceiving discomfort, pain, or threat in his body. It was so confusing to me through the PDA and sensory lens, because it's like he would be like, let's go on the trampoline, or like trampoline, and I'd go out there and he wouldn't jump, right? I'd have to bounce his body for him for hours, or I would swing him for hours. He wouldn't pump or move his body himself. But I remember there was this thought that passed through my mind through the hours of observing this and sort of trying to understand the paradoxes and like, well, if he needs proprioceptive input, why won't he just jump? And I remember thinking to myself, like, ugh, I'm getting dizzy just like spinning him and constantly like moving his body. I'm feeling this like dysregulation in my body. And I remember thinking, or the thought came, that was like, the way I feel when I'm swinging or spinning or jumping too much is exactly the way his body feels when he's not doing that. And so of course he's going to seek this movement because it's actually relieving whatever pain, discomfort, nausea is in his body in the opposite way of me. And that's called conflicting access needs, and it's really difficult as a parent, but we're just talking about like intuition, right? And so I didn't understand PDA. I was just learning about sensory from all the time I spent in his occupational therapy and with the different OTs that we worked with. But it was like this moment of knowing, of observation, and like of being like, yes, there's something there, right? There's something there, even if it doesn't make sense according to the logic of what my OT is teaching me or the experts are saying. But again, like we don't trust ourselves when we have these moments. The next example, it's more about like a bodily sensation that I had in reaction to what was suggested I did with my son. So I studied, like I bought the DVD. This was a while ago, but I bought the DVD, I bought the books for 1, 2, 3 Magic. I talked to the pediatrician about it, which is really like you're just counting down and then you put the kid in timeout if they don't start to do what they're supposed to do or don't stop what they're doing. And they're supposed to be conditioned to learn, like, you have to do whatever I say or you need to stop doing what I'm asking you to stop doing. And so I started employing this consistently and intensely, and I would put him in a timeout, and he would start screaming and lay on his back and kick the door, and it was a scream like he was in pain, and then he would also turn off the light or intentionally hurt himself, and then he would be like, I'm scared, I hurt myself, and he would turn off the light in order to be scared. And I was like, I actually would feel like pain in my chest and pain in my body, and my heart would hurt, but I would go against it because I was like, no, you have to be consistent. The book said if you're not consistent, the pediatrician said if you're not consistent, it won't work, right? So I was going against my intuition, which ultimately won out, or else I wouldn't be here. We would be talking about a very different situation. So what's happening with parents of PDAers, and is it that they don't have strong intuition, or is it that their intuition is there, but it's mixed up with fear and additionally trauma from being constantly gaslit and told that what we are intuiting and observing is not actually true? Because intuition is here to tell us what's true, what's actually true, regardless of what's in the DSM-5, or regardless of what some expert with a bunch of acronyms after their name says, or regardless of what a book says. Because intuition is here to tell us what the truth is, right? So parents intuit that their kid needs more screen time. They intuit that their kid maybe doesn't need to sit at the table and they might need to sit somewhere else to eat their food. Or they intuit that like making their kid go to school is not the right thing for their child. They might not understand why, but there's a knowing, right? So here's the thing. Parents are either hiding that they're doing this from the people who in theory should be helping, which is like the experts, the therapists, the pediatricians, whatever, or even extended family or the village, or they're going against what they know to be true because the voices are so loud in society about like, you're ruining your child, you're enabling them, they're never going to learn if you don't teach them now, you're a bad parent, etc. And believe me, like I get it too. I get it on this page, I get it in the comments. I just don't keep the comments on here because there's no reason for it. So what really irks me, and I've like moved through my own trauma on this and can talk about it more objectively, is a lens, a set of tools, or a paradigm is being presented to parents as the truth, capital T, capital T, the truth, rather than this is a framework or a lens through which we can view behavior. And if it doesn't work or your intuition is strongly going against it, let's explore some other options, or maybe this isn't right for you, right? So for example, when we're going through the paradigm shift program and parents are starting to experiment with the tools and skills that we're refining in order to create a foundation for them to understand and develop their unique path, I always say, if an accommodation doesn't feel right, or if you're intuiting like maybe this lens isn't appropriate, don't do it then, right? Like I'm not going to ever be like, you need to have my framework and do this framework above your own inner wisdom and intuition, right? Because to me, that doesn't make any sense. Often with the parents I work with, not always, but I believe more often than I would have expected before I worked with like over 1,000 parents, specifically of PDA children and teens. So I don't work with families unless it's just PDA, okay? So I have a very refined sample. So often they start to learn the tools of cost-benefit decision-making, the 12 top accommodations we can experiment with, and they realize a lot of the tools and logic and frameworks that we have put over these ideas are actually things that at one point or another, their intuition was leaving breadcrumbs in order to facilitate them to do that. Okay? So again, what I'm saying is I'm not special in the sense that like I have more intuition than you. I've taken the experience and the intuition and I've put frameworks and tools and ways that we can operationalize it in order for more families to learn more quickly and efficiently and feel empowered so that they're not constantly doubting themselves. One of the tools that we learn is how to track, measure, define, measure, and track indicators of your child's progress, especially out of burnout. So we track along 3 dimensions. We track nervous system activation and well-being, and that will be unique for your child, right? But the easiest way to illustrate that is like, okay, my child's eloping 3 times a week, but as I start to change the paradigm and implement accommodations, I'm actually measuring that it's only once a week. The elopement hasn't gone away, but we can start to see there's progress there. There's improvement through the nervous system lens. Then we look at engagement, which is the second category. And all of a sudden, if we're looking for the right data, we can see, oh, the 11-year-old girl is coming out of their room and sitting in the living room with the family. She is info dumping about her interest in this particular Minecraft or Roblox. She's asking dad to watch her YouTube video, right? So we're able to track engagement and connection with the family. The parent is improving empirically. We're collecting the data as we experiment. And then access to basic needs, which is even easier to measure because it's like, it's granular, it's slow, but are they eating more? do they have easier access to toileting, even if they've reverted to using a diaper or needing to go to the bathroom in the bathtub or outside? Maybe they're getting closer to the toilet within the bathroom rather than, outside the door or in the tub, right? Or maybe they're starting to communicate about going outside to use the toilet. Or maybe it's more like digestive, right? Their encopresis is improving. These are all nervous system indicators. And I use my doctorate degree and my 2 master's degrees to impose this logic and tool for you to use so that you can see that what you've intuited and kind of known all along is actually helping your kid, right? A lot of the tools we use, not always, but what I've noticed and what I see from families at the end of the program, and when I look at some of the testimonials, it's like, okay, the cost-benefit decision-making, the accommodations, the tracking are actually pointing back towards the parent's intuition and knowing, and it gives them a much better sense of trust of themselves, right? Because that's the core of it, and the sacred relationship between you and your child. Being able to trust that again, right? And it's very powerful to be able to put language to the thing that maybe a pang in your gut or an intuitive moment told you. It's powerful to see the data, to corroborate, oh yeah, this is actually helping. It's powerful to see other parents' testimonies and stories that actually mirror yours, right? And it allows you to trust the navigation tool that you already have been endowed with, which is your intuition, right? So my final thoughts on intuition, and this is my change and transformation as a person, because except for when I was a kid and I would make bunny salads and chase fairies, and I was very into imagination and believed in lots of different things. But as I got older, I really trusted sort of academic knowledge and experts above my own knowing. And that is one of the biggest things that has changed, and a gift that my son has given me by exploding into my life and being like, hold up. Not everything is in a peer-reviewed journal. Not everything is more important than your human gut response or your intuition. And of course, we want to balance it, and that's why I use my logic and my academic background to create tools for your intuition. But my belief is that tools, frameworks, strategies, including the ones I teach here, should never go above your intuition or knowing or connection and relationship with your child. So that's just something to keep in mind, right? I feel like it would go against everything I teach here if I thought that my strategies, frameworks, strategies, frameworks, and tools were above what you know as a parent, because that's counter to the whole purpose of what I'm doing here. Second, another thing I know from my own experience and from working with so many parents is that it can be very difficult to distinguish, and I still sometimes struggle with this, between fear and anxiety and what that's telling us, and intuition. So that's going to be really true if you have a history of trauma, or sometimes if you're neurodivergent, or if those things overlap. So the tools, the data points, the stories, the language that we have here is to help you start to figure that out. Is it a pang of knowing? Is it what your soul is telling you? Yes, that's the right direction. Yes, that's the right energy. Yes, I think I'm going to experiment with this. Or is it being driven by fear, which is what many of us have experienced when we've tried and doubled down on and been judged for more conventional parenting techniques like the one I mentioned, 1, 2, 3 magic, that I still feel guilt about, right? Because it was out of fear. I was driven by fear and anxiety, right? And so that's something that I hope, if you never buy anything from me ever, I will feel satisfied and proud of myself if what I offer here on this page and on this podcast helps you start to be able to distinguish between fear and intuition and to trust yourself as a parent again, because I believe in you. Finally, by learning to trust our intuition, we're modeling for our children how to manage their disability, because so much of their signals come from their bodies and come from their perception of energy, right? And people always ask me, well, what's going to happen when they're grown up, right? And frankly, I don't know, but I believe it's going to be positive, because we are raising the first generation of PDAers, whether or not it's in the DSM-5, in an accommodated nervous system based supportive way that's affirming their identity. And I have no doubt that this is going to be positive for how they manage in the future, right? So all those moments when you allow your intuition to at least contend with the shoulds and the fear-driven suggestions, we are modeling for our children that they can do the same. Okay, and I think that's really important. And it's not just important in the neurodiversity space. Like, everybody's burned out, everybody's feeling unhealthy. Like, it's not a bad thing to sort of tune in to how our bodies are responding to the environment, whether it's us or our kids, and acting accordingly, even if it doesn't make sense in the moment. So, thank you for being here. If your intuition drove you here, I'm glad to see you. And I hope this was helpful. It was a little bit of a different flavor than I normally have for my lives, which are usually pretty logical, but hopefully it landed for some of you. I'm just going back through. Yeah, so Indulge Nourish says, like, when I figured out that my kiddo would not thrive in school. Yeah, often that knowing comes before we know why, right? Like, before you have the PDA diagnosis, or before you have the autism diagnosis, or before you even know your child is neurodivergent. There's a knowing there. And we doubt ourselves and we question it, and other people do too, because often we can't yet put language around it. Yeah, so Mom's Cave World says, I can relate so well, every single word, I'm so happy. Yeah, the experience with my 3-year-old, I actually just remembered that story, like when I was taking a shower, and I was like, oh my God, I had forgotten that like whole period of time, because it was like something I blocked out. It was so painful. Yeah. Helpful reframe the meltdowns as panic attacks. Yes. And I absolutely think that's what they are. My mom says, very thoughtful and useful information. Thanks, Mom. Love you. Glad you're here. Just gonna scroll down. Why should parents make an idea for boredom instead of letting the kid come up with their own idea? So I think it depends on the kid, right? Like, for PDA kids, often the like, I'm bored is actually a data point of nervous system activation, not feeling safe in their body, of perceiving threat. And that data can tell us as parents, ooh, they're in their survival brain, which is where they don't have the capacity for executive functioning, for cause and effect, for coming up with ideas. Okay, so, but if you have a neurotypical kid, or you have a kid whose logic of brain wiring doesn't work like that, where there's like survival and thinking brain, then it might be the right idea to be like, you know what, I'm actually going to let them come up with their own idea. And I certainly have tried that, like, for years, right? Like, I tried to do quiet time, and I would put all these, I would put coloring books in a cozy spot, and like, my son would just escalate and dysregulate when he was disconnected from my nervous system, to the point where everything would be destroyed, all the books would be ripped up. And where if we leave the child who's having a trauma response or a panic response to do something that their brain can't do, then they're going to continually perceive more and more threat, and it makes it less likely that they can come up with ideas, and it like reduces the relationship, which my perspective is that is the currency for all transformational change for our kids. So again, if your intuition is like, you're scrolling by, you come on the live, and you're like, this woman's crazy. Like, totally feel it. You know what I mean? Like, we don't all have to think the same or have the same approaches for different types of kids. I'm just offering a different way if, for you as a parent, all the traditional and conventional wisdom and logic has not worked and has actually made things worse. So again, I'm never going to tell a parent, even if they're parenting very differently than me, that that's not the way, because I think there's lots of different ways. Hope that answers your question. And I hope your question was genuine and not just trying to like troll on me and the parents who are trying to learn, because I get a fair amount of that too. So glad I hopped on here today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience. You are so welcome. I'm so glad you liked it. Yay! This is key. Thanks for combining the importance of intuition and data analysis. Yes, you know me. I wouldn't just leave it as intuition. I need my data points. Oh, I'm so glad that the story helps you connect the dots. Yeah. Thank you. 14-year-old bringing her back to us after school trauma and bully. Yeah. Sorry you guys went through that, and I'm really hopeful for your family. Yeah, encouraged to continue to work through my own discernment between fear and intuitive wisdom. Yeah, and it's a process. Like, I'm an anxious person, so sometimes I'm like, is this anxiety telling me that this bad thing's going to happen? I'm intuiting this and manifesting the future, and I'm like, nope, slow it down. The little moments of affirmation when it feels like this madness type of parenting, as my parents call it, is working. Yeah, my nervous system responds when hers calms down. And then it's a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious cycle. Yeah, worked fine with my other two, and now you're learning something new, and that's totally great, right? How might we distinguish between the fear-based versus an intuition-based judgment? So I always like to start with body, right? So most of us, at least the families I work with, because so many of us are anxious or neurodivergent ourselves, feel it in the body when it's fear-based. So like for me, I feel like panging or like daggers in my chest, or I feel a stomach flip, I feel tightness in my jaw. And that is more associated with my fear. So I can start to locate it. Whereas like the intuition sort of comes on as a knowing, and it often comes out of nowhere, not out of rumination, right? Yeah. Do girls show up differently than boys? You know, with the families that I've worked with, at least for younger, like 11 and under, so pre-puberty, I don't, and this is anecdotal because I haven't studied it, but I don't see a difference in like, oh, girls are more internalized and boys are more externalized and more fight-flight. Like, I've worked with enough families who have PDA girls who had an externalized expression that I don't necessarily think we can draw those conclusions. And I also know from the initial statistics, I think they were out of the PDA Society, there isn't the same level of discrepancy between male diagnosis and female diagnosis. All right, my friends. So glad. Abilities First is a support organization that understands PDA. Just finished our first meeting. Your work inspired me to find them. Thanks. I'm so glad. I'll keep this up on Tiles and turn it into a podcast episode if you guys want to see it again. But I actually have a meeting with the neuropsychologist that I work with for the studies, speaking of academic stuff. So we're going to talk about the update with that. And as soon as I have some actual concrete things I can share with the community, I will. All right, friends, have a good day.